Come in, everybody. You know, we have seats in the front row, so you can actually come here. Okay, so we're going to get started with the closing keynote. I hope everybody's here, or but everybody. So those that come in now, please don't hesitate to come to the front rows. There's some space seats left. Right. Welcome everyone to the closing keynote of this DH2023 conference. So today is the 14th of July. That means that A, all French people who are here today are working on a bank holiday, and B, it is time for a final revolutionary celebration after a whole week of presenting, discussing, questioning, rotating, and turning things around and upside down. It has really been a joy, and maybe others were, like me, somehow relieved to see that what we have been doing in the secluded spaces of our homes and institutions is really part of an actual scholarly conversation in which like-minded people participate and engage. There have been in the last days encounters and exchanges and changes of perspective. Our closing keynote is here to offer yet another perspective, that of the civil society and its leverage on two crucial aspects of our work as digital humanists, namely on the situatedness of the data we work with and our own agency in the real world. While the keynote focuses on a European perspective, it is also at large addressing all of us and engaging with the material, political, social, economic conditions in which we pursue our research and in which we live. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker of today, Claire Fernandez. Claire holds a master's degree in human rights from the Robert Schuman University in Strasbourg in France, and she has been a human rights consultant before being appointed to her current position. She worked as an advisor to the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights. From 2008 to 2010, she served the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe in Bosnia and Kosovo, advising local authorities on good governance and minorities' rights. She was instrumental to the revision of the Human Rights Report on the human rights of Roma. From 2013 to 2018, she was the Deputy Director of the European Network Against Racism. And since November 2018, she has been Executive Director of European Digital Rights, that is EDRi, which you can see here, which is the largest civil society network promoting human rights in the digital age in Europe and beyond. Her areas of expertise include interethnic mediation, equality and anti-discrimination law, minority rights, economic and social rights, and good governance at a local level. Over the past years, Claire has been presented in a variety of European contexts, defending the rights of Roma, talking about gender equality, and fighting discrimination. In her publications, she steps up for the rights of minorities and consistently defends democratic structures. As the Executive Director of EDRi, her focus is on the defense of human rights in the context of the digitization of our societies. She has an excellent knowledge of the leverages that the European Union provides in a global context and will now talk to us about contesting power in the digital age, the role of civil society in Europe. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. That was probably the longest introduction that I've ever received. So thank you for bearing with it, and thank you so much for your attention. I know you've had a long week, so thank you to those still here. It's really an honor to be here. And really thank you to ADHO for the kind invitation, for the local host for your wonderful welcome here in Graz. And really thank you for opening a bridge for civil society to also contribute to your work. So when Anne invited me, and as she reminded today, she told me, you'll have all the more reasons to embrace the revolution themes of today, noting the appropriateness of having a French person coming here to talk about revolution on the 14th of July. And indeed, I would note the appropriateness of having a French person actually coming to work on a public holiday. So today, I want to focus on contesting power and what it means for EDRi in our work at EU level, in our advocacy, as this is also something that Anne asked me to do. And I will end by an invitation to join forces. But before that, I wanted to give some background as to how big tech dominance manifests and why, in order to counter it, we need an understanding of both technologies and the structural structures and the societal issues of our time. So while France commemorates the French Revolution bringing down monarchy, the country is actually still shaking after an uprising, after Nael, a 17-year-old boy of North African descent, was killed by the police, shot dead at point-blank range. These latest protests actually are against structural racism in the police and police violence, and they echo those of 2005 and even those of 1983. Many French people of African descent or from post-colonial immigrant descent live in what Rokhaya Diallo names fear combined with rage, the result of decades of accumulated injustices. Revolution is legitimate to combat injustice and power abuse. This conference calls for papers was calling to investigate the plurality of revolutions in the digital age. To EDRi, this means investigating power. This means contesting state and private actors abusing their power to control, to surveil and manipulate. This means looking not just at technology, but how technology is embedded in the power structures of our times. So for the last 5 days, the conference has explored collaboration as an opportunity and the role of digital humanities in the backdrop of a world in crisis. And while I'm just beginning to dive in the full depth of your work, there seems to be, as for traditional digital rights civil society organizations, a widening of the scope of the digital humanities. So I'm glad to see this conference articulating the link between such a wide range of disciplines, human sciences, the humanities, and digital technologies. Computing is indeed often associated only with engineers, with technologists and scientists. In fact, when I joined EDRi as the ED, as the executive director almost 5 years ago, I also was new to digital. And as I was taking over from a middle-aged white man, and with years of experience in technology policies, it was quite scary in the beginning, I won't lie. And the field is still filled with technology jargons, policy terms that act as a barrier for everyday people to understand how technology affects them. So within our network, within EDRi, we often experience that tension. Can one have a say on technology, how it is used, how it is deployed, if you're not really an engineer? At the same time, should politicians and decision makers regulate this field, which was unregulated for so long, without understanding how the technology works or how digital policy would actually translate in practice? At EDRi, we argue that we need both. Understanding how technology really works is key to avoid techno-solutionism or manipulation. Yet we need to decenter technology to understand the socio-economic tensions of our societies that define how technology is used. So what I'm getting at is that we should move past the schoolyard and have geeks and hipsters unite to ensure sound and safe digital futures. And note that I'm not sure to which category would the digital humanities fit. If it's geeks or hipster, perhaps you know. So if you consider the role that technology plays in our understanding of the world, it is only normal to take democratic decisions about it. Technology must work for people, for democracy, and the planet. Technology can amplify societal problems, yet there are no simple technology fixes to complex societal issues. Digital technologies have provided enormous opportunity for connection, access to knowledge, collaboration, organizing for social change, for revolution, indeed. They are part of our daily lives and change how we work, what we eat, who we love, how we love. The use of data, machine learning, accessibility technology in academic research offers the premises of better results, of evidence-based solutions, of gain of time. Powered by AI or any other technology, researchers can better connect, collaborate, and disseminate their work. But what is at stake here? What are the risks for civil society, for society as a whole, and for academia? What tools are being used and promoted? Who owns them? Who benefits most from their deployment? Is that even something to be desired as a consequence? The climate crisis, economic recession, the mental health crisis. In our capitalist systems, we're driven by imperatives to demonstrate research productivity, to innovate and to grow. The dominant market dynamic is to surf on the digitalization wave, to embrace the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution, we are told, is characterized by a fusion of technologies that is blurring the line between the physical, the digital, and the biological spheres. And I believe the digital humanities field is also not immune to this commodification of academic research, to digitalization, to datification, and the blurred line between the virtual and the reality. Big tech dominance in academic research is striking. Companies like Google or Microsoft have spent tens of millions of dollars funding academic research, especially on AI ethics. In the US, a study finds that 58% of faculties at 4 prominent universities have received grants, fellowships, or other financial supports from 14 tech firms. So in the next minutes, I just want to lay out 3 of the main issues with big tech expansions. First, the tools that we use are not really for free. The use of Google or Microsoft tools or other AI-powered tools raises questions of privacy and human rights. Most big tech companies have based their entire business model on online behavioral advertising that is based on profiling and tracking people online, what at EDRi we call surveillance-based advertising. There is an unregulated and unlimited monetization of data extractivist business model that benefits big tech. In fact, today, the US tech stocks are worth more than the entire European stock markets, according to a research from the Bank of America. Second, big tech funding contributes to the corporate capture of academic research and of regulation. Investment in think tank, academic research, NGO, or lobbying supports the spread of their narrative, their framing of the issues. According to a study from Corporate Observatory Europe, lobbying spending from big tech has increased considerably in Brussels, higher than any other industrial field. Together, these companies spend over 97 billion annually lobbying the EU institutions. This makes tech the biggest lobby sector in the EU by spending, ahead of pharma, fossil fuels, finance, and chemicals. In all but one goal, Margarita Silva from Corporate Observatory Europe tells us to push back against any strict rules that could affect big tech's business model and profit margins. And at EDRi, we see that lobbying effects in our day-to-day work. For example, a recent investigation from the Time magazine showed how OpenAI lobbied the EU AI Act regulations, which I'll talk about in a moment, successfully including foundation models with less legal requirements. They are not really considered high risk per se. My colleague Sarah Chander from EDRi has explained more about this loophole that they managed to include. It shows that OpenAI, like many big tech companies, have used the argument of utility and public benefits to mask their financial interest in watering down the regulation. And third, big tech dominance in public domains, such as education or academic research, raises more fundamental questions as to what is public in our society and who decides what is researched or not. Timnit Gebru has said, in order to truly have checks and balances, we should not have the same people setting the agenda of big tech, research, government, and non-profit sectors. So combined, the grabbing of this narrative has led also to dominance, expanding to power grabs in our infrastructures, whether computational infrastructures like clouds, or infrastructure even in our streets through the so-called smart cities. Of course, all of this pales in comparison with the thrills of the first human-humanoid high-level conference organized by the UN last week, if you've missed that. But joke aside, this is not really new, or a new side effect of technology. In fact, Seda Gerses from the TU Delft University has studied how historically computing was a technologies of control since the Cold War. Computers have roots in US management of military forces after World War II. Then we moved from the business of computing to personal computers, the clouds, mobiles. And this computing infrastructure has ever expanded to provide both commercial actors and states the tool to control, surveil, and decrease people's autonomy. And here, I would be interested to hear historians or other of you in the room who may be looking at digital technology and surveillance as an object of research. Digital technology and computing are indeed in the direct line of the sophistication of surveillance and punishment methods described, for instance, by Michel Foucault in Surveiller and Punir, in Discipline and Punish, the Birth of the Prison. So, contesting big tech and state surveillance is at the heart of what we do at EDRi. EDRi is a membership organization with 50 members organization active in Europe and beyond, and we have partnership and collaboration at our core. EDRi was founded about 20 years ago, actually 20 years ago this year, by 10 NGOs from 7 countries, visionary in anticipating the Brussels effects on regulating internet and digital technologies. And as Europe has found a contested role in championing the regulation of technology, the role of an independent civil society network is more important than ever. The challenges to our freedom and rights, online and offline, continue to arise and threaten our privacy, safety, dignity, and agency. And what is at stake is our ability to have a livable future, a just digital society. So, what keeps us busy at EDRi trying to convince lawmakers about these futures? Well, in order to understand our vision, you also have to understand the context in which policies are made in Brussels when it comes to technology. In 2022, the EU, the European Union, adopted its Digital Decade program. Before that, other industrial strategies were existing. But in this Digital Decade program, we have now targets for the digitalization of public services and companies. 100% of key public services should be accessible online. 80% of citizens should have a digital identity. 75% of EU companies should use the cloud /AI/big data, which are used interchangeably. And 80% of the population should gain basic digital skills. So this reads more like a business plan rather than a policy program. In fact, civil society organizations were barely consulted or involved at all, whether in the conception, adoption of the plan, or in its implementation. The plan's ethos is the uptake of AI, 6G, clouds, Web3, and other digital hypes. And the societal challenges, the harms on people, our rights really, are just considered as an afterthought. So the EU digital policy serves technology for market growth and profit, while we want agency, dignity, and accessibility. They serve technology for security and surveillance. We want privacy, freedom, and community care. They serve technology for exploitation and manipulation. We want freedom of expression and information. They serve the exploitation of natural resources and people for technology deployment. We want societal sufficiency. This vision, therefore, means recognizing all dimensions of technology, centering people, and especially challenging injustice affecting marginalized groups who bear the brunt of technological harms, ending the extractivism of resources in the global south, and protecting the invisible labor that is necessary for digital transformation. It all sounds grand and revolutionary. In reality, we're just trying to survive the tsunamis of regulations that are being negotiated. You may have heard of some, like the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, the Data Governance Act, the Cyber Resilience Act, the AI Act, the e-privacy regulation, the European Health Data Space, the Political Advertising Regulation, and so on and so on. Please do not ask me about all of them. But in particular, I wanted here to focus on three areas, three topics, where we think are at the frontier of power expansion at the moment: artificial intelligence, online platform regulation, and digital security and encryption. So, regarding AI, in Europe and around the world, AI systems are already used in ways that affect our daily lives and may be harmful. AI systems are used to monitor and control us in public spaces, so-called facial recognition. They are used to predict our likelihood of future criminality with predictive policing. They're used to facilitate violations on the rights to claim asylum, to predict our emotions and categorize us, and to make crucial decisions that determines our access to public services, welfare, education, and employment. So together with 150 NGOs, we really call for strong regulation now. We shouldn't make the same mistake as we did for the regulation of online platforms after we waited the Cambridge Analytica scandal. What we hear is affirmation like, let's make mistakes and test in real life, and then we'll see how to regulate. But these are real harms of people that are being done, and our lives, and especially the lives of migrants or people at risk, should not be, as Petra Molnar says, experimenting testing grounds. There's already plenty of evidence on the ongoing harms, especially when decisions are made on people that have disastrous consequences. In the Netherlands, for example, tens of thousands of families were impacted by wrongful accusations of fraud to social and child benefits. Decisions that turned out to be based on discriminatory AI systems that were targeting families based on their foreign-sounding name, migration background, or neighborhoods, or other proxies for racial profiling. This led to kids being separated from their children, to people losing their home and their livelihoods. And while the Dutch government fell over this scandal in 2021, similar systems have been used since, leading to more and more harms on people. So we call on the EU institutions to ensure that AI development and use is accountable, publicly transparent, and that people are empowered to challenge harms. We call for the ban of certain uses of the technologies that in our view can never be justified: predictive policing, uses in migration contexts, biometric mass surveillance, or the use of facial recognition in public spaces. We call for an update of the high-risk areas of uses, including healthcare and insurance, and also human rights impact assessments for the institutions that would choose to use high-risk AI. We also call for a right to an effective remedy for those that are affected by AI systems, and also a series of environmental protections. And while we've had some tractions with the position of the European Parliament that led to some wins in the final position of the Parliament, for example, wins in terms of getting human rights impact assessment in, or prohibitions of facial recognitions. Yet there are still some gaps, in particular when it comes to systems deployed in the migration context. And as I said before, loopholes when it comes to foundation models. But as the negotiation progresses, we really expect a lot of resistance from member states about the AI uses, especially in the law enforcement context, and more loopholes and carve-outs for innovations. On platform regulation now, the exploitative business model of big techs impacts our access to information, our participation and expression online. It can also contribute to manipulate or controlling people. Surveillance advertising leads to the amplification of harmful content and of disinformation. And with generative AI, we see even greater possibilities of harms to the public spheres. More disinformations, manipulation, mental health issues, but also smear campaigns against the non-profit sectors or human rights defenders. And this AI model grabs massive amounts of data from the internet. In Europe, there are privacy and data protection laws that should apply already, and they provide many tools against tracking and targeting people. The General Data Protection Regulation, the famous GDPR, which is not always properly enforced, yet has led to some notable fines against big tech. So for instance, following a long complaint by EDRi member Noib, none of your business, they are based also in Austria, Meta in January was imposed a set of fines totaling 980 million by the Irish Data Protection Commissioner for unlawfully processing millions of Facebook and Instagram users' data to target them with advertising. And since Meta keeps finding another legal basis to process data, but the Court of Justice last week has ruled against the use of the legitimate interest basis without having the user explicit consent. On top of the GDPR and through other angles, we now have the Digital Services Act, the DSA, and the Digital Markets Act, the DMA, that attempts to look more at the systemic risk problems beyond fines. The legislators want to address the scale of online risks and harms due to the size, power, and dominant market positions of these companies. So the DSA regulates online content, managing the risks that are linked to online content on platforms, while the DMA clarifies in law what is anti-competitive behavior. So now, very large online platforms will have obligations such as external audits, annual risk assessments, allowing researchers access, but also the stop to processing data of children for the purposes of advertising, and also stopping the use of special sensitive data like our political affiliation, our sexual orientation, for targeting people online. So we would have liked and lobbied hard for the DSA to go even further in terms of banning surveillance advertising, but this is what we've got. So now we're waiting for the Commission and the EU member states to really start using this regulation in practice and to start enforcing, seeking independent civil society data, research, and expertise. Our future work here on the DSA and the DMA will be focused on advancing safeguards and rights during the implementation of this new law, support strong enforcement. And we help in doing so to really find alternatives to the current dominant business model. And finally, encryption and digital security. So while many of us do not know what encryption is or what it does, most of us use it on a daily basis. We use it when we use our bank app, when we connect to a safe website, or even when chatting with friends on WhatsApp or Signal. Encryption protects the confidentiality of the message and the communication, much like envelopes used to. It enables confidential communication, but also sustains our capacity to work, to organize, to socialize, to love, and to care for each other safely. For some, like human rights defenders or over-criminalized groups, for journalists, encryption and digital safety is vital. One of our biggest worries at the moment are the fierce attacks on digital security tools and on encryptions in countries such as France, the UK, and the US. In France, a group of left-wing activists were criminalized for using encrypted message, where this is a perfectly legal and responsible digital security practice. And of course, the EU could not miss on the latest surveillance trends, as it has its own proposal on the table, which would lead, if adopted, to undermining the fundamentals of encryption. This is often done in the name of combating child sexual abuse, terrorism, or other problems. And what we see is the criminalization of the use of tools that are essential for safeguarding democracy, organizing, for journalists to protect their sources, for protesters to organize protests, for loving and expressing our sexual preferences. We see how states are going after end-to-end encryptions or propose solutions that would amount to scanning our personal device, much like installing spyware on our device. EDRi will therefore continue to promote a safe internet for all and to reject simplistic or impossible technological solutions to complex societal issues. This was a brief overview of the issues we work on. But we can't really do that alone. We remain the underdog, as I said, in the face of corporate lobbying and in front of the strong security and innovation narratives. So we really need all areas of academia, and especially the humanities of all disciplines, to help shape the digital society of our futures. We need also social movements. We would also like to contribute to other causes, right? We count on each other. What can bring us together is the need for justice, the need to have people-centric technology, an alternative to dominant infrastructures. Together we could plan and achieve revolutions. At EDRi, for instance, we push for reclaiming the role of digital public infrastructures, for alternatives to dominant big tech technologies, and for democratic control and funding for the key infrastructures and key digital services and applications. At EDRi, together with our partners, the Digital Freedom Funds and 30 people from social justice organizations, we also start by questioning ourselves. We've asked, are we the best place for the digital rights field to truly advocate for equity and justice? So we've co-designed a program to look at what decolonizing the field would look like, what kind of activities, what kind of transformations are needed to center the perspective of those that are affected by technological harms. I've seen that around the Black Lives Matter protest in the US, ADHO has made commitments to reflect critically at its history and practices to combat structural racism and establishment violence. This commitment must also stand in views of the structural police violence in Europe too. So I've used some of my time to give an overview of the problems with big tech dominance and how EDRi contests this power of state and private sector alike, especially in the field of AI, platform regulation, and digital safety. And I will end, because I know you're all really tired, with an invitation to stay in touch, to join, for instance, our annual civil society academia event, Privacy Camp, in January in Brussels, to join or support the EDRi network as individual observers, to contribute with research, as we need more strands of work from people who work in archives, in libraries, in art, in cultural heritage, to interrogate the role that technologies play in our society. We would also be happy to be of use to your work. So thank you very much for your attention.
Can you hear me? Yes, you can hear me. Okay. Thank you very much, Claire, for this fascinating talk, which was on the one hand a bit terrifying, and on the other hand also, well, optimistic in the sense that there are structures to do something about it. I really liked especially what you said at the beginning, that regulation is needed to ensure our freedom. I'm very much looking forward to what the North American colleagues are going to say about that. Don't know if they're going to see things the same way. I'm picking up on what you said last about the infrastructures, and I would be interested in which form you work on support public infrastructures, because there are several representatives of public infrastructures here.
Well, just on your point in the US, I think our colleagues in the US and a lot of non-profit organizations are actually calling and waiting for a privacy law to finally be adopted in the US, and that privacy regulation would also be really useful to regulate other sectors like generative AIs and other forms. So, you know, there's a lot of push in the US, but I understand what you mean about the role of the states in varies on different sides of the Atlantic. But there's also not just the US and Europe, right? There are also other regulatory spaces that are doing great work. On public infrastructure, we've been calling for Europe to fund and to create a fund, like European public infrastructure funds, similar to what exists in the US with the Open Technology Fund. And also ensuring that every time that we use public money for funding research, for funding infrastructure, for funding software development, we also make sure that it benefits the public. So we've done a lot of work with other movements like open data, but also organizations that specifically work more on infrastructure.
Okay, so I would be opening the floor for questions. I hope I can see if you raise your hand, please do so. And we'll bring the micro boxes to you.
Thank you very much for the fascinating presentation. At some point you said something about funding for AI ethics, and I thought the way I see it, big tech is funding AI, is not funding AI ethics, it is funding a lot of research on AI safety, or so-called AI alignment, which is something different because it focuses a lot on the long-term risk and not on the present dangers. So I wanted to ask what is your view on that, and personally, I feel that this is being done to distract from the present danger because it would attract regulation, while the long-term risk doesn't actually impact the companies now. So.
Yeah, I think you probably know that more than me in terms of like research, but yes, we've seen a lot of groups, so whether directly funded by big tech or through other think tanks, looking at the existential risks, right, for humanities. And there's a lot of groups that are working on that. And while indeed we would call that a distraction to the actual current harms, and especially, as I said, there's a lot of distractions to when it comes to security, law enforcement, or migration uses. or public sector uses that are currently happening. And we try to make sure that we always bring back to the current harms in our negotiations, in our advocacy, but also that regulation is, in the extent that is possible, future-proofed as well, and does not create loopholes that would exclude certain uses or exclude certain kind of technologies just because companies are trying to do that. We're making sure that everything is in, and then of course the regulation regulates according to the risks of the uses.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
The other question behind, yeah.
Thank you for this motivating presentation. A few days ago, there were some news about, I think Thierry Breton said, in the context of the Digital Services Act, to block platforms if they violate this DSA. What is your opinion on this, or do you support it?
Can you repeat?
Thierry Breton said that they might block platforms like Twitter or social media if they support like violent protests or demonstrations.
Yeah, I think we did this very recent when it comes to especially Macron's positioning in France with the latest protests that I just mentioned, and I think we're really looking at with paying more attention to this adverse kind of reactions and applications of the DSA. We've always been advocating in the DSA regulation to addressing some of the systemic risks that I mentioned with advertising, but also to ensuring that there is freedom of expression guaranteed by having no strong incentives for platforms to censor and to take content down or filter it to the extent that is possible. And we've been successful in making sure that the DSA maintains that, and we will continue, of course, advocating for that.
Thank you.
Oh. 1, 2, 3 questions. I'm not sure in which order you raised your hands.
Okay. Wait, I can pass this one. Yes. It's really soft.
Okay, that's some throwing. Yes.
This is
well
much
done.
more than I expected. Okay, thank you for your very important presentation. I wonder why the word competitiveness has not been used in your presentation. When it comes to AI, I guess I understand your focus on the EU, but the EU is not an island. And I wonder if in your lobbying, you are also trying to see what is the relationship that the EU is having with other countries. Because the push towards obviously implementing quite a lot of these new strategies in relation to AI is because there is not a concerted effort with other governments and forces in the world. So I'd like to have your view on this.
Mm-hmm. So if it is a push for Europe to be competitive when it comes to AI and other technologies, this is something that we try to address a lot, which is that Europe should not just win the race to the US and China when it comes to AI, but it should really center what kind of technology should be promoted. That AI respecting the so-called European values or our visions of technologies in society. And we don't believe that they would make Europe less competitive to other parts. We just believe that it would actually ensure that some uses are not possible. And perhaps that addresses your question when it comes to like the narrative that is being presented.
Yeah, but also, you know, if you can see your lobbying going also beyond Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you...
Yeah, that was the second part.
Yeah.
This is something that we struggle a lot because we are many Eurocentric and based in Europe. But we've tried to work, first of all, with our members that are global organizations, so located in other areas. And we try to the extent that is possible, also connect with other civil society, non-profit sectors in other regions, trying to understand the impact of EU regulation that it would have on their work. So, for instance, not on AI, but on the DSA, we were really careful to not making sure that we're not giving authoritarian regimes the tools to censor and to block internet. And well, we see that it's happening even in France or even in Europe, right? But like, what would it look like in other countries? And if Europe does it, why wouldn't other states do it? So we're trying to do that to the extent that is possible. But on AI, what we see is also, because regulations is not, for various reasons, happening in other regions, we see a multiplications of like the forums, the Trade and Technology Council between the US and Europe, and then other OECD forums and other declarations or other initiatives that states are doing. But we also see that as the risks of watering down EU regulations. We also see that as a risk of multiplications of these forums, and also as a way, for big tech companies to influence what is being negotiated in the law in Europe. So, yeah.
There were at least 2 other questions in this area, so if you could pass the mic, that would be great.
Thank you for this presentation. I was wondering if you could speak more about EDRi's position or plans to promote real education and digital literacy, because it seems to me that, especially in a European democratic context, it would be kind of like the sneaky way to counterbalance the big tech lobby.
So we do work a lot, and part of our ideas of achieving change is indeed by informing people, by having more awareness raising, but also mobilization. So we have campaigns, we have ongoing campaigns, for example, on facial recognition or encryption. I invite you to have a look. Some of our members, maybe not us as a network in Brussels, but a lot of our members do talk to educators or people doing more digital literacy to try and bringing a rights awareness, right? Not just like knowing how to use the tools, but knowing what tools you use and what are our rights and how it affects them, and trying to promote alternatives. We have a big community of people that are looking at open source alternatives and so on. However, user empowerment and user freedom has been, I think, something that has dominated our field for so long, but it's very kind of 90s way of visioning the world, right? Like, if we would only protect ourselves and if we would only know how to do better. But those companies and these systems are so wide, the scales of the problems are so big, that if we do not address also the problem systematically, if we don't advocate for regulation, it's not enough to just have user empowerment, in my opinion. And I think a lot of organizations in our field are trying to recognize that, therefore also trying to advocate for regulation that looks at the collective harms. For example, in the example that I mentioned about the Netherlands, right? Like, what could have people don't do differently, right? Like, they didn't even know that this was happening and why they were being targeted. So to some extent, it's really taking the issue much more upstream and preventing this kind of harms at scale.
Thank you.
Okay, there's another question over there, and then here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your talk. It's such an important initiative. I would like to get back to the second point on your slide, AI platforms and digital safety, where you talk about and surveillance advertising. Now, that seems like like a huge thing if it would actually be turned into legislation on a European scale. And I wonder how optimistic you are about this, or how much you can say about the possibilities of such a process to actually be performed against, obviously, the economic will of the companies who promote and to live off of that model. And on that note, perhaps a follow-up question, how much of this actually, how concrete is that as a strategy behind that? Because one thing is the information that is being gathered in order to have a micro-target way of economic advertising, but there are other layers to it, right? There's the interface, the graphical user interface, which actually is the reason why the rabbit hole can happen, because it has something to do with the way we interact with the machines and certain design decisions that these companies have taken in order to push that, our psychology to actually go down the rabbit hole. So yeah, on the large scale, how possible is that in your opinion? And on a more precise point, how precise would the targeting of these models be, even concerning design questions? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. When we started lobbying, advocating around the DSA 5 years ago, we were kind of the only one to talk about ending surveillance advertising. And we were told, like, it's never going to work, and why are you calling that? And we have the GDPR, or, you know. And at the end of the day, we really managed to put it on the table. It was taken by the parliaments as their position when they went into the negotiations. And in the end result, as I said before, we managed to ban targeting that is targeted advertising for children and based on sensitive data. So if you can ban it for children, or if you say children are more vulnerable to this and that advertising, or if you can ban it while using certain form of sensitive data, why can't you do it, right? Like, this could have been possible. It's just the reality, again, of the negotiations, of corporate lobbying, and so on and so forth, right? Like that. But we also did manage, and that's to some extent addressing the design questions, to address, to ban at least continue the GDPR regulations on dark patterns, right, on manipulative, deceptive design that forced us to give our consent. But you're right, like, the problem is the tracking, the problem is the mass data scrapping, and then what is being done on that. And we've seen some progress, and I think we're confident that we need to keep pushing. As I mentioned, Meta is going to court because they are trying to use all forms of legal, they're trying to use the legal basis to justify that why they target people and their users, and they are, I think, slowly realizing that they won't be able to maintain these models. And we think it's achievable to change, to finally stop this surveillance advertising. And if you think about it, it's as I think Shoshana Zuboff said, it's not so long if you think about it. It's not a model that has been existing for so long. So of course there are powerful actors, but if we are not asking for it, if we are not pushing for it now, then who will?
There's a question here. Are there other questions? Because I can't really see. No, I think that's here.
Thank you for your important talk and topic. And I want to pay attention to the second side. And we speak a lot about problems with violations of privacy rights, but there are there are some examples when unsolved technically or legally issues with access to privacy information can help and discover some crimes, for example. And I know some examples in this field connecting to Russia and, for example, with poisoning of Navalny, or with Russian war crimes in Bucha, when all things and events were investigated using illegal access to privacy data for some people who are not good enough in digital literacy and security and so on and so forth. The question is, do you in any kind try to analyze such cases or collect such cases, and what do you think about it? Thank you.
I think the central question here, like as in any kind of human rights concerns, is proportionality. Is the means that are deployed by law enforcement proportionate to the crime that they're trying to address? And when it comes to war or other kind of context, the legal basis is always kind of usually different. And so we try to develop like more fine-tuned analysis when it comes to war propaganda and so on, and how maybe the framework that we use doesn't apply there or is different. Of course, we hear those arguments every day, right? Like from member states, right? But it served solving this crime. And what would you say to a mother who lost their child that we need facial recognition? But actually, there are no evidence that deploying those systems at scale and with the proportion that it would have on targeting massively, right? Like that's why we call it biometric mass surveillance, that is actually helped in this and that cases. Like those, we don't see that it's a proportionate deployment and response in those cases. But we work on that tension on a daily basis, yeah.
Are there any questions left? Raised hands that I wouldn't have seen? Yes, there's one here.
Oh, wow.
Very good.
Thank you. I was thinking about, since you mentioned before end-to-end encryption, and there was recently a leak of information about which member states from the European Union would support weakening encryption, and most of them were in favor of weakening encryption. And I mean, not publicly, but so I was wondering, since I think this is maybe due to a lack of understanding of the fact that if you weaken end-to-end encryption and you create a backdoor, that backdoor can be used also by malicious people and not just by police. Also, it could be used maliciously by police, for example. So I was wondering, what is the best way, in your opinion, to convince the European governments or the member states and the relevant agencies that end-to-end encryption must be preserved?
If you find the argument, please contact me, because we are trying every day. But I think what you said is right. That officially you hear lots about. Of course, we don't want to touch end-to-end encryption, but we would create, for example, the latest technology dream is to have this client-side scanning. As I said, that would mean accessing our device before text, photos, or everything else are encrypted. But we hear technologically solutions that are not really possible or pose even broader risk, right? But also the argument you use, which is there is no such thing as like creating a backdoor that only the good guys can use. That's the argument we've used, and that I'm sure you've seen also Meredith Whittaker from Signal made in the case of the UK recently, and others. But also, what we're trying to make the case is that encryption is really the last bastion of privacy in this age of surveillance, and that it is used by most of us. It is used by, but also really people at risk, right? Journalists, human rights defenders, sex workers, protesters, youth. So this is the kind of arguments that we're trying to use, is that you're not really targeting just the bad guys, you're creating possibilities that would harm people at scale and would create worldwide consequences.
Thank you.
Okay, well, please join me in applauding Claire one last time. Thank her for Keynote. And yes, Thomas. We're proceeding with the closing ceremony now. So.
Thanks a lot, Claire. That's great. Okay, I have to say that I'm impressed with the numbers, that we are still strong. And I also never trust people when they say they're going to make things short, but we'll try our best. Chairing this programming committee has been a wild ride for Anne and me, and it would be an exaggeration to say that it was pure pleasure, because my idea of pure pleasure does not involve scheduling and deadlines and waking up to exploding mail inboxes, etc. But it is no exaggeration to say that it has been truly an honor and a privilege. And because I was introducing our first keynote on Monday, I didn't get to participate in the litany of acknowledgements. And fear not, I'm not planning to actually restart an endless procession of appreciation. But I do want to take this moment to thank Anne, not only for her, and I love that I'm speaking about her in the third person if she was not here, for her infectious, unwavering enthusiasm for our field, but also for bearing with me so stoically during the past year. Anne is one of the best organized and most methodical people I know, yet she was stuck doing this job with me. And I think you must have done something terrible in a previous life to be punished so terribly. I have turned procrastination into an art form, and I'm one of those, last moment kind of guys. And Anne has been wonderful with me. But with all joking aside, we were always 100% in sync, I think, about things that matter when it comes to organizing a conference like this. The quality of research, the transparency of the process, and doing everything we can to strengthen the community. And both Anne and I were also incredibly lucky that we could work with Walter, with Martina, with Georg, with Elisabeth. Working with friends is the best, and no matter how stressful things got, we still managed to, giggle like children and enjoy the whole process. So thank you, guys, as well for that. So we are delighted how the conference turned out. We loved the vibe. We loved witnessing all these over-caffeinated conversations during the breaks. We loved seeing Walter do his best disco moves. But another point that Anne and I, where we were fully in sync, was our preoccupation with the challenges of matching the kind of idealistic principles of open science that we really, really believe in, with the constraints of getting things done in the real world and at a scale. And I think Anne hinted at that by saying at the beginning in her opening remarks that we know the peer review is the best process we have, but we know very much that it is not ideal and that we are constantly trying to improve it and reinvent it. And we also, like most of you, are acutely aware of the burdens of invisible labor in academia in general, but also in digital humanities in particular. And we also know that not all that is important can be counted, and that not all that can be counted is necessarily important, which makes the review process for a conference of this size particularly difficult. But that's also why we wanted to, in these closing remarks, to actually also address the peer review process one more time, and we wanted to recognize you for the reviewing work that you did and that made this conference possible. I need to... Yes, which is why we have established the Best Reviewer Award, and we will announce it now. The award was based on the nominations that were handed in by the people, by you, by the authors. And this is and I will now read all the nominees. No. So these are the people who have been nominated by you for writing particularly useful and constructive criticisms. Those who are highlighted in bold received multiple nominations. We took those who received multiple nominations. We excluded ourselves, members of the programming committee, because we thought it would be really inappropriate. But also statistically, we did more reviews than anybody else. So of course, Anyway, we analyzed the reviews, and we were particularly impressed and inspired by not one, but two of these people, which is why we decided to actually award the Best Review Award to two persons. And this is the big reveal. So, the Best Award... The Best Review Award goes to Rosamund Thornton and Wenyi Shang. Rosamund is a PhD candidate in information science at Cornell University, and Wenyi is a PhD candidate in information science at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. One of the authors who nominated Rosamund wrote, "This review has been very helpful in rethinking and enhancing our project. The reviewer has taken great interest in various facets of our project and has offered very helpful and insightful and concrete suggestions." And one of the authors who nominated Wenyi wrote, "The feedback was detailed and helpful, showing that they had not only taken time in reading and evaluating my abstract, but had thought carefully about both the positives of my idea and the areas that could be improved in ways that will be really constructive towards revisioning of this paper." And this is, for us, it's music to our ears. This is what we would love open peer review to be about. Rosamund couldn't be with us today, but Wenyi is here, and he will say a few words on behalf of both of them. Congratulations on this well-reserved award.
Thank you very much, Professor. It's a great privilege for me to receive this esteemed award on behalf of myself and Rosamund Salkin from Cornell University, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us today. I want to convey her sincere apologies for not being able to attend the DH2023. She truly wishes she could be here with us today. The annual DH conferences played a significant role for me as a junior scholar, as they have significantly shaped my academic journey. My first attendance in the DH conferences was DH2019 in Utrecht, the Netherlands, which stands out as a particularly rewarding milestone. Participating in that conference immediately before embarking on my PhD journey allowed me to immerse myself in the welcoming and inclusive DH community. I also presented at DH2020 Ottawa, Canada, and DH2022 Tokyo, Japan, though unfortunately both were reformatted to online versions. Participating in each of these conferences further solidified my identity, scholarly identity, as a digital humanist. Rosamund and I are very truly grateful to the DH community and the DH conference that facilitates the community. Coming together every year and see all the diversities and innovative DH research is truly inspiring, especially for junior scholars like Rosamund and I. Putting together such an event requires great effort, but it really supports building a community of scholarly community all over the world. We are truly thankful to everyone who put efforts in creating, in planning, reviewing, organizing, and making this event happen. Therefore, when it comes to us as contributors, as reviewers to the DH conference, we are always eager to lend our perspective and give back to the community that is so instrumental in our growth. So reviewing is one of the most important responsibilities that we can perform as scholars. And it's vital for ensuring the quality of works and providing new ideas that will eventually be published or presented in our community. We're so proud that this act is recognized by fellow scholars. And receiving this award acts as additional motivation for us to continue our dedication to the academic community of digital humanities. And finally, for a personal note, receiving this award marks as another milestone for me in my academic career. With only a year remaining in my PhD program, this recognition further inspires me to seek new opportunities in the academic job market. And I'm eager to explore new possibilities and new roles to further contribute to the academic field of digital humanities. Thank you all once again for this tremendous honor, and thank you for being a part of this truly inspiring event. Thank you.
Insert the drum roll. Yeah, sorry.
Yes. No, it's before. Oh, wait. Can we refresh the slides, please?
What?
We need to refresh the slides.
Refresh.
Somebody hit refresh slides.
Can somebody refresh the slides?
Serves us right for waiting till the last minute to fix our contributions. This is the part of the event where I'll just riff. Where people start jumping up and down on the stage. And so I am not awards committee chair, and Lady Ann McDivitt, who could not be here and for whom it is the middle of the night. She asked me to represent her and the awards committee for the next section on ADHO awards. First, it is important to recognize once more the conference bursary award winners. Thank you. The conference award bursaries are awarded to students in early career. What did I do? We good? Okay. Never do a live demo. The conference award bursaries are awarded to students and early career scholars who have submissions accepted for presentation at the annual Digital Humanities International Conference. These awards are to encourage new contributions to scholarship in the digital humanities and to involve new participants in the application of information technology in humanities research. Both paper and poster submissions qualify for consideration, and we congratulate you all again for being able to participate. The Paul Fortier Prize is an award from ADHO named for Paul Fortier, late university distinguished professor of French at the University of Manitoba in Canada. The award honors his long, active career in humanities computing and particularly remembers his kind encouragement and support for fledgling scholars in the field. The prize is given for the best paper by an emerging scholar at each conference. An author may be considered an emerging scholar for purposes of this award if, for example, they have not yet earned a PhD or having earned it within the last 5 years, they are positioned in an entry-level academic appointment at a university or junior position in an organization involved with digital humanities, and/or they are new to the digital humanities from another discipline or career. Current students are eligible for consideration if their paper is substantially their own work rather than co-authored by an established scholar. Multi-authored papers are acceptable if all authors are qualified emerging scholars and share the award. Through the course of the conference, 2 or more reviewers attended and observed each candidate presentation and made recommendations to the awards committee. Factors considered included research excellence, imaginative and/or innovative use of technology in support of scholarship. I hope you appreciate the drum rolling in the background. Development or extension of research methodology, contribution to the digital humanities in general, or in some specific field of arts and humanities research. The awards committee would like to thank the reviewers who participated in this important process, to acknowledge the work of emerging scholars at DH2023. Your thoughtful comments and evaluations are greatly appreciated. And therefore, it is my honor to represent that this year's Paul Fortier Prize winners are Sharanya Ghosh, Vasandra, I'm really sorry, Vasandra, I'm kind of nervous actually, Vasandra Daya, Lavanya Daya, Anya Chadya for their presentation D or H, What Leads in DH, Envisaging the Digital Humanities Space in India. Thank you. All right. The Roberto Busa Prize is an award named in honor of Father Roberto Busa, one of the founding lights of humanities computing, who in 1949 began experiments in linguistic automation with the support of the IBM offices in New York and Milan as part of his analytical research on the writings of Thomas Aquinas. The computational work was central to the 30 years of research, whose published output was the 56-volume index, Latin, Thomisticus, completed in 1980. The Busa Award is given to recognize outstanding lifetime achievements in the application of information and communications technologies to humanities research. Nominations are now open, and the award will be presented at DH 2024. Please stay tuned, checking the ADHO website for information about how you can nominate someone. And with that, I'm handing it off to Michael Sinatra.
Hi, everyone. As chair of the conference coordinating committee for a few more hours before me and Pinia take over, I'm going to tell you in just a few minutes where we will be going in DH for DH 2025. But first, because you're all excited to know even more about where we are going, and you know that already for sure, in 2024 in Washington, D.C., I invite our colleagues, Amanda Madden and Jessica Otis, to come and tell us more about that. I don't know which way the remote works.
We're playing the who has to do the button game. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Otis, the Director of Public Projects at the Roy Rosenzweig Center for History and New Media.
And I'm Amanda Madden, Director of Geospatial History, also at the Roy Rosenzweig Center for History and New Media. And we would like to invite you to save the date. We're very, very excited to be hosting DH 2024 at George Mason University's Arlington campus in Arlington, Virginia. So the dates are August 6th through 9th. Our contact information is there. We really do hope we see you there.
Our conference theme is going to be reinvention and responsibility. And as part of that, we as local organizers have made a commitment to being both hybrid and accessible. In terms of hybridity, DH2024 is going to be the first DH conference that has had the benefit of actually planning to be hybrid from the beginning. And we have been working with our program committee chairs to create multiple pathways to participate in the conference, both online and in person. Accessibility, this is part of our commitment to being accessible. This is for those who cannot physically attend, as well as for those who can. We view accessibility broadly, accommodating what we traditionally understand to be disabilities in the United States, but also thinking about other structural barriers to access, whether it be childcare and elder care responsibilities or the cost of physically attending the conference.
If you do decide to join us in person in Arlington, George Mason University's Arlington campus, where it's being held, is very centrally located and within 5 minutes walking distance to public transportation. And it's about 20 minutes by train to Washington, D.C., the United States Capitol, which allows you to take advantage of all sorts of interesting cultural institutions and other types of institutions. And it's going to be an election year, so it'll be an interesting year. So, you know, there will be lots to observe and see. But, you know, going back to cultural institutions, there's the Folger Shakespeare Library, the Library of Congress, lots of libraries, and, of course, the many wonderful and diverse Smithsonian institutions, most of which are free. Please feel free to reach out to us via Twitter, our website, which will be up very soon, and our email. And whether you join us in person or online, we really hope to see you next year.
Thank you very much. And so now the big reveal. 2025 will be hosted by our colleague in Lisbon, Portugal. With the theme of building accessibility, open science to all citizens. As a new feature this year, the COB decided to invite program chairs to be actively involved 2 years in advance of the planning of the conference. So we can even tell you as well that the PC chairs for 2025 will be Jimena de Rio Grande, de la University of Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Manuel Portela, de la Universidad de Coimbra, Portugal. And finally, to give you a little, even more, craving to go and wait 2 years, here's a little video that our organizer kindly put together that they couldn't be in person today. Here. And I guess then the next part is there.
It's with great pleasure that Nova FCSH, Universidade de Aveiro, and Universidade de Évora announce that the Digital Humanities Conference in 2025 will be in Nova FCSH in Lisbon, Portugal.
The conference will be between the 15th and the 18th of July, with the workshops starting on Bastille Day and optional excursions on Saturday 19th. We will highlight accessibility and open science as the focus of the conference, building on linguistic and cultural diversity. Digital Humanities 2025 will be an opportunity to consolidate and expand digital humanities in the Portuguese-speaking world, Probably you recognize Rio de Janeiro on the back. But we do speak and understand other languages. So our motto for the conference will be
Informação digital universal e acessível para todos e de todos.
Universal and accessible digital information for all and from all.
Información digital, universal y accesible para todos y de todos.
Information numérique universelle et accessible, mise à disposition par tout le monde, pour tous et pour toutes.
Bem-vindos a Lisboa, ao Congresso Internacional de Humanidades Digitais 2025. Informação digital acessível a todos e para todos.
Building accessibility, open science to all citizens.
There it is. So we are slowly approaching the end of this year's conference and already looking forward to 2 more conferences. And that's a good moment to reflect on it and on the DH community more generally. For that reason, we would like to invite you all to take a very brief survey developed by Quinn Dombrowski as part of the ADHO Identity project. You will very soon find a blog post providing some context at adho.org/news. And if you scroll down a bit, you already find a blog post on another slightly more involved survey, that on the submission evaluation criteria. So if you would like to join to shape this particular aspect of the conference, please do take advantage of this opportunity to do so. Thank you.
The work of many people makes the conference and all of the community work in ADHO possible. We would like to thank them all, but we will most certainly miss some. And in this moment, we thank the local organizers with Georg, Walter, and Elizabeth, and the whole huge team. We'll hold the comment. Where's... There is a fly, literally. We'd also like to thank the program committee chairs, Andrejo and Toma Tasovic, and all members of the program committee. We'd like to thank this past year's ADHO committee chairs and all committee members, Paul Arthur and Martin Grandjean, Admissions Committee, Anne Lady M. McDivitt, Awards Committee, Michael Sinatra, Conference Coordinating Committee, Hannah Jacobs, Communications Committee, Simon Wiles, Infrastructure Committee, Cecily Reynaud, Multilingualism and Multiculturalism Committee.
We would also like to thank all of the constituent organization board representatives, Susan Brown for Citizen, Fatiha Idmand for Humanistica, Paul Miller and Rachel Hendery for AADH, Quinn Dombrowski for ACH, Nadeja Provoznik for CenterNet, Susan Brown, there she is again, for Citizen, because she was also president, Menno van Zanen for DASA, Fabio Ciotti for EADH, Kiyonori Nagasaki for JADH, Isabel Galina for Red HD, and Richard Tsonghan Tsai and Chaolin Liu for TADH. We also thank the executive board officers and chairs, Glenn Worthy, who was the chair, Diane Jakaki, the incoming chair, Megan Sensini, the secretary, Juan Stein, the treasurer, Melanie Conroy, the incoming treasurer, and Hannah Jacobs, the communications officer. And we would also like to take this opportunity to welcome Michael Sinatra, the COP president-elect. And we would also like to thank two more people, and I would ask you to come up for that, Susan and Glenn. We would like to thank Susan Brown, who has been the president of the COB, the Constituent Organization Board, for the last year, and president-elect before that, and who has been with ADHO for a long time. When I first joined the steering committee, as it was called in 2015, Susan was already there and had been the representative for Citizen for the Canadian Society for Digital Humanities for some time. When I rotated off in 2018, Susan stayed on. And when I joined the COB again 4 years later, in 2022, she had been there the whole time and started her role as president of the COB. This is just to say how much Susan has contributed to ADHO over the years. She helped transition ADHO to the new governance model and was able to bring this process to a conclusion over the course of the last year. Thanks to Susan, and of course, thanks to her predecessors as well, Isabel Galina, Carina van Dalen Oskam, Elizabeth Bohr, and Matt Gold, to name just the most recent ones, ADHO, I think, is in a much better shape today than it probably ever was. I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to work with Susan over the last year. She taught me a lot by example and by explaining all the intricacies of ADHO. She has been incredibly committed and hardworking, and everything we may be able to do over the next few years, Susan has launched. And I know we can call on you, Susan, if we need it, or rather, when we need it, because we will. Thank you for all that, Susan.
And we celebrate Glenn Lane-Worthy, who has been chair of the executive board for 2 years, the incoming chair for 2 years before that, a steering committee chair, and I honestly cannot remember all of his other integral roles, but long ago, before that, one of the original organizers of the DH Fun Run, and if it is not an urban myth, the person we can thank for the phrase big tent as local organizer of the DH 2011 conference at Stanford. It cannot be overstated how much of himself Glenn has given to ADHO in these past 4 years. Along with first EB Chair Leif Isaacson and COB Presidents Matt Gold, then Elizabeth Burr, and then Isabel Galina, Glenn has worked in so many ways most have never seen to keep us on course through what can fastly be described as a turbulent sea. Glenn leads with his heart, and I wear mine on my sleeve, so it should not have surprised me this morning when I realized that we have never butted heads, but we've often butted hearts, and then bonded when it was time, it's true, when it's come to trying to keep things together and keep everyone moving forward when so many would have just moved away. His was always wise counsel. It is not fair to Glenn to describe him as ubiquitous in ADHO contexts, because to do so would mean that he must be on call whenever we need him. While I have no doubt we will see Glenn at ADHO events and activities, especially those that resonate with his passion for multilingualism and inclusivity, it is time that he gets to take an ADHO vacation. As long as once in a great while he answers my bat signal if I am in desperate need of his guidance. Do you get a pattern emerging that Christoph and I are going to be doing this a lot? Okay. In terms of our goals for 2023 and 2024, thank you. In terms of the operational goals, I'm hoping we can work with the overarching question, what does it mean to be a part of the ADHO community? And major operational goals that we're thinking about and starting to articulate come in 5 sections. First, the code of conduct, which we want to expand and enhance beyond the conference to include commitment to and a participation in ADHO activities throughout the year, including committee work, workshops, and social media. Volunteering. We need to think carefully and intentionally about the ways that people can become more involved in the operations of ADHO, to act on our understanding that volunteer officers and chairs live in different parts of the world, have different schedules, that their times for availability to do this kind of service do not always align. And so we should be more welcoming to people who want to be involved but don't always feel that we can accommodate you. But we can. We also need to recognize that the reasons people do want to participate as officers and chairs is that they have something they feel they can contribute beyond what is outlined in the job description, and encourage them to integrate their own ideas for change into the jobs they take on. We want to focus on ConfTool and the conference, streamline the ConfTool mechanisms, centering on how we can make a really powerful tool work for us and with us, integrating more clearly and ensuring that submission and reviewing do align in terms of keywords, assignment of reviews, acceptance of submissions, and participation in the conference. We're going to focus on data analysis. We've convened a working group to assess our existing interests and needs for information. This year, we will focus on putting in place best practices about individual and interconnecting communities, connections between COs and ADHO, financial documentation that will help us to keep ADHO healthy and vibrant, curating and archive ADHO's functional history to help our future colleagues access and learn from what has come before them. Almost done. Most importantly, got a lot to do. Most importantly, we need to always remember that when we speak about ADHO data, we really mean people, and therefore need to respect privacy, identity, and positionality, and be responsible about what we gather and to what extent we can report on and share with the larger ADHO communities. Finally, transparency. We need to try at every step to be as communicative and transparent about process and outcomes with regards to ADHO's operational work.
Thanks, Diane. Yes. And in this spirit of openness and transparency, we would also like to share with you some of ADHO's aspirations for strategic development over the course of the last year. And I purposely call them aspirations, not objectives or goals or milestones or something dangerous like that. Generally speaking, we want to develop the idea of ADHO as an organization that is explicitly value-driven. And that means, on the one hand, to continue to work on clarifying what our shared community values really are. Some come to mind: openness, accessibility, we have heard them as well, fairness, democracy, community, integrity, diversity, sustainability, transparency, innovation, maybe even efficiency. That is really aspirational. And it means, second, it means thinking about how these values can very concretely inform the ways we conduct ADHO activities. And in that spirit of trying to make it a little bit more concrete, we have also defined some strategic goals. First of all, we want to continue improving the conference experience. And that's in support of openness, diversity, accessibility, and sustainability. And it's great to hear that DH2023 have these values, 2024 and 2025 have these values in mind as well. This concerns, for example, an expanded language policy, better evaluation criteria, or a more useful keyword setup. We also want to work towards improving ADHO's implementation of the diversity, equity, and inclusiveness goals, and that's in support, obviously, of diversity, fairness, openness, and accessibility as well. We want to better integrate these concerns in all of ADHO's activities, and we want to consult with the MLMC, the Multi-Language and Multilingual and Multicultural Committee, and the IITF, the Intersectional Inclusion Task Force, in particular, to make this possible. A bit more mundanely, we also want to work towards further developing ADHO's diversity of income streams. We want to supplement the income from the flagship journal, DSH, For example, using the newly introduced ADHO service fee, a contribution by the CEOs to ADHO's finances. And maybe, but this is tricky, even using the conference or sponsorship as additional income streams. Finally, we want to continue our work on making ADHO more transparent and more welcoming to members of the community. For example, by reporting more openly and by taking the risk of announcing our objectives and goals and activities, by organizing the community forum that we organized for the first time this year, again next year, and hopefully the following years, and of course also by further developing the website and communication strategy. There's a lot more. We're not going to get bored, but these are the most important aspirations. Thank you.
This is probably the least organized part of the local organizers. I looked at the slides during the last session and saw, oh, there are people, Walter organized everything, and there's stuff on it, on the slides. But well, we talked a bit about what to say, how to arrange it. We won't make it long. We want to thank Walter.
Yeah, you all know, obviously, that yesterday, Legends of Rock Deep Purple rocked the venue outside. But there is actually a very legendary band that has been rocking this place and this entire event for the entire week. And that's our local team of the Center for Information Modeling and our lovely volunteers, and I would ask all of you to join me in applause for them, and I would ask all of you to come up to the stage, because without your diligence and without your passion and your great energy, all of this would never have been in the spirit that it was. And while Georg continues in one of the most important tasks that we had during this conference, and that is thanking our volunteers and our team, we come to the last round of gratitude. Don't worry, we're not going to repeat everything all over again, because we'll never be finished thanking all the various people that we need to thank. But there is one last round of gratitude that we really want to share with you, and that is our gratitude to us and to you, to all of our community, for your academic contributions, but also for your incredible show of support and acknowledgement for what happened here, because this really made this whole conference for the entire team a blast and a joy to organize with you and for you. So thanks again on behalf of the organizers for coming to Graz. Thanks again for sharing in this event that has been a whole lot of a vision that we tried to realize over the last four years, and without you, none of this would have been possible, and without the spirit that you are creating for such an event. So our gratitude to you, safe home, safe travels, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
ist zu wenige. Ich habe ihn nicht.